Okay, so as you can see, I start off with a plain white scaffold. And first thing I'm going to do is add a bottom navigation bar, which takes a list of items, and the items we're going to use is a bottom navigation bar item. And this item takes an icon and a label. The label is going to be the text that sits beneath the icon. And this bottom navigation bar allows us to create that menu tab thing that we have at the bottom of WhatsApp. And we're going to add 5 of these items. And one is going to be for the status menu, one is going to be for the calls, communities, chats, and settings. And of course, in this video, we're just going to code the chats page. That's it. So I can adjust the icons that we use. So we're going to have a circle one for status, the call for the calls page. We're going to have a groups for the communities, message for the chats, and of course the settings icon for the settings page. The reason why I used outlined icons is because the way the WhatsApp UI is that if we're not currently on the page, then it's going to be outlined, and if we are currently on the page, it's going to be filled in. And now, as you can see, I am changing the labels to match the icons. Now, before we can render this, or before we do render it, I'm just gonna make it of type fixed bottom navigation bar dot type dot fixed. And what this does is it just makes sure that the bottom navigation bar is formatted correctly and all the icons are inlined. And now, as you can see, we can render it to the screen, to the emulator, and it looks very nice. Now, just to make it more proper, I'm going to give it an elevation of 0, so it's not elevated off the background. And I'm going to give it a color of a light grey, which is how it is in the iOS version of WhatsApp. Now, the current index, this controls which page we're currently on. So if it's an index of 3, which means it's going to be on the 4th icon, which is the chats page. Okay, now to start off with the app bar, we're going to give the first thing, which is a leading, and it's going to be a text button in our case. Now we can leave the onPressed blank because we're not going to give the button an actual function. The child of the text button is of course going to be a text widget, and that text widget is just going to say edit. Now, as you can see, we rendered the app bar onto the screen and it's not how we want it, so let's just change it a little bit. Firstly, let's make the elevation 0 so it's not lifted off the screen. We want it to be flush with the background. And also we're going to change the color to white because it needs to be the same color as the background, which is just how it is in WhatsApp, in the iOS version at least. And now we can add some styling. The first thing we do is we can give it a font size of 17, which I think is big enough. And now the app bar takes a list of actions. And in our case, it's going to be 2 icon buttons. Once again, we're going to leave the onPressed blank. And for the first icon, it's going to be a camera icon. And again, I use the outlined version. And I'm going to give it a color of blue because if we don't give it a color in this case, it's going to default to white. And we won't be able to see it because it's going to be blended in the background. And in WhatsApp, the icons are blue. So now we can copy and paste this. And for the second icon, we're going to add an edit icon. In WhatsApp, it's actually a bit different. It's a new message icon, so like it's a box with a pencil, but this is the closest icon I could find in Flutter. Okay, now for the body, we can first add a column because generally everything is in a column layout. And the first child in this column is just going to be text. And you can see that the text of chats is right against the edge of the screen, which we don't want. So what we can do is we can wrap the column in some padding. And in our case, it's going to be edge insets.symmetric because we want the padding only to be on the horizontal axis, so there are 2 sides. And I'm going to give it a padding of 20. Now we can add some styling to the text. Firstly, we can change the color to black. And we can also make it larger with a font size of about 35, which is nice. And lastly, we can give it a font weight, which will make it bold and make it stand out. Now underneath this text we're going to have a row, and this row is going to be so that we can create the search bar and a separate filter icon widget. For the search bar, we're not going to actually use a search bar, we're going to just create it with a container. So for now, let's add an empty container, and we can add an icon button after that. Again, the on pressed is going to be blank, and we can just grab a random filter icon. I couldn't find the exact, Flutter doesn't have the exact same one that WhatsApp has, but I just used the one that which we had. Again, it's going to be outlined, and I'm going to change the color to blue. Now for the search bar, first thing I'm going to do in the container is give it a color, and for the width, one thing about containers, we can't see it until we give it a specified width and height. So for the width, I'm going to use media query with context to give it a maximum width that it can possibly take, which is the size of the screen. And then I'm going to minus some width from it so that we can actually fit in the filter icon. And then a height of just about 35. Now 50 wasn't enough, so I'll just change it, just adjust it to see what can fit in the icon. 90 seems okay. And now I'm going to change the color because grey is too dark. Let's give it a lighter shade. And now we want to give it rounded corners, so we need to give it a decoration. And once we add a decoration to the container, we need to move the color property from the container into the decoration. Otherwise it will give us an error and we won't be able to view the container on the screen. Now we can give it a border radius, circular border radius of 20. Or about 10 looks fine. And now inside that container we can give it a child, which is going to be a row, and this row is going to have an icon and a text. So firstly we can give it the search icon, with a color of grey, and it needs to be a darker grey than the grey that we gave to the actual container. So a grey with shade 700 is fine. And then we can add a search text after that. And for the styling, we can just give it the same color as the search icon. And I'm just going to change the font just a little bit so it can be slightly larger. Now what we can do is give some main axis alignment to the row so that we can have a space between the two widgets. And then after that, I'm going to add some padding to the container so that the search icon and text is not right at the edge. Now under this, we can have a row because we need two text buttons that says broadcast lists and new group, which is blue text. In this case, we're not going to use text button because again, we're not going to give the buttons the actual function, so I just decided to use text instead. But if you were to give them actual functions, then of course it would be more correct to use text buttons. So the first one is just going to say broadcast lists, and for the styling we can give it a font size of 17, which is the same as the edit button at the top. And of course we want it to be blue in color. Now we don't want it to be directly underneath the search bar, it's too close, so we can add a size box between them two with a height of about 20. And now as you can see, we have a bit of space between them, which is how it is in WhatsApp. Now we can copy and paste this because we have two texts, and the next one is going to say new group. Now we need to add some main axis alignment on the row so that we can have the two texts at opposite sides of the screen. And this is done with the main axis alignment dot space between. Now underneath this row, I'm going to add a divider, which is going to be a dark grey color. And now what I'm going to do is code the chat items. So as you know on WhatsApp, when you go onto the chats page, you have a list of all the conversations you had or you have, and each chat item has the profile picture, the name of the person you message, etc. Now this is a repeated widget, so in Flutter or in programming in general, it's not good practice to just copy and paste the code many times. It's more better to use reusable components or reusable code. So what I did is I created a new file called chatitem.dart, and inside it we have a widget called chat item. Now this widget is basically a container. I give it a color of red just so that we can see it, and a height of 100 and width of the maximum possible space. So again, I do that using media query with context .size.width. Now I go back to the main file so that we can add it in the chat item underneath the divider, and as you can see, it's on the screen. The red color, of course, we're going to change it later, but this is just so that we can see the height and the width. So now within this chat item, the first thing we have is going to be a row, and the first thing in the row is going to be the profile picture of the person we've messaged. Now in our case, I'm going to use a circle avatar for this, and we can add a background color of blue so we can see it clearly, and I'll give it a radius of about 40, which seems okay. Now what I can do is, next to the profile picture in the row, I'll add a column because we have multiple text widgets on top of each other. The first text is going to be the name of the person we messaged, so I'm just going to add a random name. And then underneath that, we're going to have another text widget. And this text widget is going to be the most recent message that the person or we have messaged in that conversation. So in terms of formatting and styling, the first thing we can do is we can change the alignment because we don't want the text to be centered. So we can give the column a cross-axis alignment .start so that it aligns to the beginning. And now we can add some styling to the text. The first thing we can do is create the contact's name, make it a bit bigger. So I'll give it a font size of 19 and a weight of bold. And then for the message, I think we can give it a slightly bigger size and a different weight, and also I'll change the color to a grey color. Now we can remove the color of the container and see how it looks. So it looks okay, but first things first, the text is too close to each other, so we can add a sized box with a little bit of height, and that looks good. And also the same thing, the text is too close to the profile picture, so we can add a sized box with some width, and that looks a lot better. Now what I'm going to do is wrap the name of the contact in a row because I actually want another piece of text next to it or in line with it, and this is going to be the date of the conversation. So we can just add a random date. And what I'm going to do here is add some styling, so I'll give the text a color of grey and a different weight. We can make it slightly bigger, the same size as the message. And now what I'm going to do is add a size box, just so that it appears as though the date is at the end of the chat item or the container. Okay, now at the bottom of this widget, I'm going to add a separate divider because between each chat item we have a divider separating the two. So if we just add one divider to the bottom of one chat widget, the more chat items we add, then there's going to be a divider between each of them. So now if you go back to the main file and we copy and paste the chat item a few times, now what we can do is we can fix the formatting of the chat's text that changed for some reason. So just to make it align at the start, we're going to wrap it in a row, give it some main axis alignment, and that will make it back to the start. And there you have it. We have coded the chats page for WhatsApp, and in the next video